Okay, so welcome to the June meeting of the Open Government Advisory Group. There's quite a bit to cover today, but we will start with a welcome. Barney, do you have anything to say before we get started?
Welcome, and I think our turnouts have improved, and I think that's good. So let's hope we can keep the momentum.
Okay, so let's do roll call. I guess I'll start since I have the microphone. Tiffany Crow, public member and chair.
Alan Karnofsky, Office of the City Administrator Designee.
Barney Krukov, Interim Chief Technology Officer and Vice Chair.
Brian Flowers, Interim Director of the Office of Open Government.
Zach Walter, I'm the designee from the council.
Victoria Wasmer, I'm the Director of Agency Operations in the Office of City Administrator.
Elaine Block, Office of the Attorney General Designee.
Rebecca Lee, sitting in for Jennifer Comey from DME.
Shannon Turner, public member.
Josh Tauber, public member.
Kathy Pettit, public member.
Bob Becker, public member.
Rebecca Katz, I'm EOM designee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Julie Kanzler, Office of the Chief Technology Officer Designee.
Tom Moyer, Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel.
Marie Whitaker, Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development.
Jay Melder, Office of the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services.
Julie, you're not a designee. You are a named member of the OGAG in the mayor's order. So I'm here as Octo's person, but you're not my designee. You are a separate member. We can both vote.
Okay, so at this time we will ask if there's any public comment. Okay, and the gallery is empty. So item number 4 on the agenda is to review and approve the meeting minutes from 4/5/18. Do we have a motion?
Did anybody get them?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor? All opposed? I guess I didn't have a second. Does someone want to second that?
I will second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Robert's Rules of Order is really boring to read, but I'm doing my best. So, okay. Any other comments on any of the things we've covered so far? We're moving pretty quickly, so. Okay. So the working group list, this is going to be like 30 seconds. 6 people emailed me with their choices for the working groups. And so I brought a sign-in sheet for the working groups for people to just today, when you get a chance. I started to like fill in things for people, and then I was like, here, I'll sound, mind, and body. So I should just let you pick if you get a chance today. So that will be available at the end of the meeting. And then, Barney, do you want to lead the discussion about the 2 matters for discussion and possible vote today?
Yeah, sure. We're not jumping to those. We're introducing them, or?
Well, introducing them just so Barney and I had a conversation about these items since they were sent this week. They were sent this week, which was fine, but we also wanted to open it up to Josh and the folks who submitted these documents for discussion, because people may have feedback on them. And so the question arose, like, are we voting on these documents as they exist right now, or do we need to do a motion to amend? Are we going to discuss the content today and make suggestions and edits? And so we didn't want to give short shrift to those folks who wanted to vote on them for sure today, but also wanted to give the members of the group an opportunity to comment and provide feedback. So that's sort of the introduction to the actual documents. I think my my thought for the first item, which is the transparency toolkit, is that like there may not be that much substantively that folks want to change, but that it's a living document, that kind of thing. So just to open up that discussion briefly, Barney, that was sort of
Okay. And then the second one will likely take more debate. And it's the resolution on the Office of Open Government. And I assume that this would go through the similar process that we just went through with our meeting minutes, right? Someone would have to enter it, probably Josh, since he wrote it, and someone would have to second it, and then we could ask for amendments if we wanted amendments, and we would vote on something, right?
I was going to lead the discussion on the transparency and usability because it's actually a working group document.
Right.
I took no credit.
You deserve a lot of credit.
Thank you.
That's definitely the first one. I was asked to mention both. So let's start with that one and what the working group has accomplished and what you would want.
All right, so we started to talk about this last week when we broke out into our various working groups a little bit, and we kind of put a hook into this meeting to talk about the product that a few of us on the old Transparency and Understandability of Data working group. It's such a mouthful, but I love that title because it's very descriptive. We were trying to work towards making data understood, right? And so if we can put data out there in a way that it is usable and understood, it's more than just metadata. We've had these conversations here. And we decided that it was a pretty big undertaking, so we did a bunch of research and we uncovered some really interesting guides and documents out there, all of which are in the material that we sent. So for example, Data SF San Francisco puts out a open data release toolkit. There's the Open Data Handbook, and Sunlight has the tactical data engagement book, which they have been using, I guess, under Sunlight Cities. And there have been some really interesting things going on there recently. So we decided as the first step in this project to help agencies identify their stakeholders, right? So we figured, you know, if agencies had an understanding of the community that would use the data that they're putting out there, that there would be greater buy-in and greater understanding and more connection points for the community members to identify people, knowledgeable stewards within the district to ask their good questions. One of the things that we hear over and over again about Open Data DC is, I want a name, give me a name. And so this is kind of adding the human element. So what we did was we met with a couple of groups, one of which is represented here today. I think we talked to you, Marie, as part of this. Identifying various entities that might have a stake in open data. So there are the geographical and residential communities, the various ways that DC is broken down into different neighborhoods. There are information professionals. So nowadays, data journalism is everywhere and is growing. How do we talk to those people? How do we answer their questions? How do we, or better yet, how do we write and produce data so we don't have to answer their questions? So, you know, I'm going to stop talking, but if you had a chance to read it, I would love to hear any kind of feedback you have. I think that it would be really nice for us to identify this as a product that we can put out as something that this group worked on, something that had representation from members of the public and staff, that that we can use to help agencies start to think differently about how about their role in the open data sphere. That was a lot of words.
Or I'll ask Julie. So one of the things was, where are we going to put this?
Yes.
Do we know?
So I don't have a definitive answer for you because it turns out to be fairly complicated. There are a couple of, we definitely will put it on the OGAG website, but as we know, that's not a heavily trafficked site. And to make it most useful, we've talked about various ways that we can share it on, for example, Open Data DC. The Octo team is putting together data release materials, and this could certainly be a part of that. But we always want to make sure that we identify this as something that was a product of this group and not an Octo document. Another option is, and you guys can all weigh in on these thoughts, another option is to put it out on the Octo blog, which is also not heavily used, but we would like to do more.
So I think the idea that the OGAG website is not heavily trafficked, that's part of the reason why we wanted to like liven up the committees again, partially because bringing traffic to that website would be great. And so Josh's question about where do you want to put it is proven, but also how do you want people to use it? So is this like part of a series, like a blog series? I guess it's step one, like identify your stakeholders, or is it a checklist? So that, I think those questions are those I had.
Yeah. I'll let others on the working group talk. Oh, sorry. You're looking at me like, where is the microphone?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would make sense for Octo to collaborate with the Office of Open Government on providing tools in one place to help people find information about the DC government.
Could be cross.
I'm saying, trying to figure out one place.
Well, we believe we have one place for data. One place for information on the DC government is the whole DC Gov website is information on DC government.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is there should be one place that we can put on the homepage of dc.gov that says, here's where you go to learn how to get the information you're looking for.
This is primarily directed at agencies, though, right? So this is how to look outward.
I understand that, but understanding that for people who are trying to get information is important because it helps everybody understand what's the structure, what are the file systems out there, and how do you access them, and what are they used for?
We don't mind at all, cross-reference material with the Office of Government, but we do feel like data.dc.gov or opendata.dc.gov from there is the central place for this sort of information. We put a lot of information there. We have a lot of data stories there. We put the inventory of data sets there. We would, as Julie said, put this there and on the OGAG page. We're also working on a data submissions handbook. This speaks specifically to the data piece, and I feel we have a center place for putting that. We also recognize that not all data sets are there that should be. So if you take a look at the enterprise data set inventory, there's 190 plus data sets that agencies say are open, but are not yet available on that open data site, which we pledge to work to drive that number down. But that to me is the place. We have it. We should enforce it.
Okay. I mean, the other thing is that the Office of Open Government is charged with training agencies. Okay. So it makes sense to have it somehow there too.
The web itself is distributed, so we just link a lot.
I think we need a formal vote on this, or because that was the suggestion, but do you think it's just like something we could do? I mean, this is a real question. If people are want to be formal with it, then that's fine. But I don't see anything objectionable about this.
I mean, I think we could eventually make a recommendation. I think we need more information before we can do that. on how this should be handled ultimately. I think
materials, and I think how materials should be handled.
well, the training, the materials that are aimed, this kind of material. I mean, where it should be, it seems to me, is an operational thing. They may know, Octo may have the best view of what it is. If they want us to ratify that, that's one thing, but I don't think we need to tell them where to do it.
Well, the committee brought this up.
Yeah.
We didn't ask for it, but we
But
accepted
you
it.
were asking
And-
about
and,
the
and we agree we are working on a data submission guideline. And I also would say that we are the good people to teach people about data submissions from within the government. We would be lousy at teaching them how to comply with the Open Meetings Act or FOIA. We should do that, but this part of the three-legged stool is one that we actually have training on. We have an interagency data team that meets, that has a website. We train people in the GIS system and the business intelligence systems. We have quite an operation that is fairly centralized.
Go for it. I don't see why we need to ratify that decision.
Well,
You question whether
I was suggesting that a place, if the question is where to put it, I think there are other places it could go. But, at this point, you're the guys who have to maintain it and run it.
Good.
And you're responsible for it.
So I think the point was to endorse it as a OGAG product and content, and then that was the request, right? And then the details about it should be mentioned lots of places and can be dealt with going on.
Just to speak as all of us, right? We're like, I think the proposal is this is some research that we did, and we want to put it out as a group, as on behalf of the whole group. And not that we thought that was objectionable either, but we didn't. There was no process, so we thought, and just as backstory. So this is the second draft, and we had brought an earlier draft, which is almost identical, really, in like October maybe, and we got some feedback here at the time, and that feedback I think was incorporated, but it was so long ago I don't remember.
I think that was like my first or second.
Yeah, that's right.
It looks really good to me. So I don't know, Barney, if your comment about how you guys already, Octo has a function that does some of this work was to say.
No, I was saying that because I felt Bob was trying to. I wanted to publish it, and we were arguing about where it should be going.
Okay.
Not that it's good. I would make a resolution that the Office of Government, Open Government Advisory Group endorses the work of the subcommittee and adopts it.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, great. Congratulations. Thank you guys for bringing this forward twice, and for taking the feedback of the group the first time. And I think whichever committee, like working group, subcommittee, I got an email from Tom about like making sure we are calling it the right thing and have the right structures in place. And he's right, so I'll be just like throwing the words out there for now. But whichever group this fits in with now, then that group, if they can take on like where it goes and how to get it published, then that would be great. So thank you again. So that brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is the proposal put forth by Josh and Bob and others on the group. I don't know, there were several people who worked with them to put together this proposal. And so for those of you who came in after Barney and I spoke about sort of process-wise, in terms of resolution or voting on this, there are likely to be more substantive comments or feedback on this document than the toolkit document. And so just trying to let it be known that if it must be voted on in its current state, rather than with a motion to amend, there will be several people who either have to abstain or will vote no just based on its exact content. But if everyone is open to working on this document as a group and getting it to a place where we are all comfortable voting in some capacity, then we can do that too. So, Barney, I didn't really frame that as a decision point, but I guess we could open the floor for discussion.
Why doesn't Josh put it in resolution?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so several of us here. I don't particularly want to name people unless people want to say, but worked on this. You know, I did not author this. It was a synthesis of ideas from basically everybody that was participating on our thread, and I will just offer, as a bit of a curmudgeon maybe, that we opened this up to discussion 2 months ago approximately, right, and have been working on it, not diligently through the whole time, but in any case, folks who wanted to have contributed had an ample opportunity to contribute, which isn't to say I'm opposed to making modifications, but it actually was, it took us some effort to get to a point where we all were not even in unanimity. We did not have consensus among ourselves on the fine details of this either. And it would be difficult, I think, to reach consensus. Not that we're going for consensus. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
No, that's a great point. So maybe for now we open it up to like comment and see where the the major areas of comment or concern are. I have a few, but I don't have to start.
So. I can start. I have a few points. I was gonna offer. I actually had alternate language suggested that I didn't email out yet, but I had a few points. Speaking as with my position too as an appointee of the Office of the General Counsel and the Open Government Officer. So I do some of the open government work internally for EOM, and some of the issues I wanted to see from the statement is statutorily, the Office of Open Government isn't actually charged with enforcing FOIA. So some of the language in here with vigorously enforcing the Open Meetings Act and the Freedom of Information Act, statutorily, the director of the Office of Open Government isn't actually able to do that. They issue advisory opinions, so I had thought, can we take out the Freedom of Information Act, leave in the Open Meetings Act, and then that would change some of the language in the third point as well. The other thing I thought was we could add to the statement if we did vote on something and there was a statement, is I think a sentiment that was missing, and I hope the office would want to do as the Office of Open Government is counsel people on the Open Meetings Act and teach and educate. And it's not just about enforcement. It's not just about taking people to court. It's about educating agencies and, finding those pieces of the Open Meetings Act that are vague or have been uninterpreted, or the practical challenges that some boards and commissions have with compliance, and, really put a counseling and an education component into our sentiment as well with enforcement. Obviously, if an agency, if a board or a commission or a public body is flouting the Open Meetings Act, we should absolutely, have some capacity to enforce, but I thought we can introduce some language about counseling or education as well. And then lastly, the reference to actually two more, but the enforcement actions have been upheld in court. There's only been one action in court that I'm aware of. So there was actions. I would want to know what we're referring to in that case. And then the general sentiment that Begas, and I know we'll have disagreement, Bob, on this, but moving the Office of Open Government kind of with Bega as kind of an advisory, or going to the Bega board to talk about their decision, his or her decisions and opinions. I don't know that I would categorize that as reducing the independence of the office. I think if anything, having a second check or, some type of reference or other people to go to on enforcement actions or on advisory opinions, which is ultimately what the office creates, is not reducing the independence when it still falls under an agency that is completely independent from the executive office and from other agencies in the mayor. So I would just disagree with some of the characterizations in here, and then hope to just add a little bit of context about what we hope the office or the director would do. That was a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for looking at it too, for everybody who did and came prepared with comments.
So I had a question, like a more of a factual question, was that what's the appeal process now? If the appeal process won't be big, there's no appeal process?
Under the Open Meetings Act, there is no appeal process. That is a historical issue that's related to the way the Office of Open Government was created in 2010. It was sort of haphazard, and it happened between first and second reading in December at the end of a council period. So there is a bill that David Grosso and Mary Cheh introduced that would solve that problem, but the Judiciary Committee has not held a hearing on that bill in the past 2 council periods. So there is a solution out there, but it is not in the statute now. The only entity that can enforce the statute is the Office of Open Government, and under the OMA, there is no place to go from there.
Comment on that?
And just one more thing, under the current statute, absent the amendment that is proposed under the BSA, the board would not have authority over an appeal because it has no authority over either the Open Meetings Act or FOIA in the current statutes.
Yeah, right now there's a case that, an opinion that was appealed to court, and it was dismissed. The court said it didn't have jurisdiction, so there's no appeal to court right now. The ethics board has said it does not have jurisdiction to consider appeals from these OMA opinions. So there is no remedy currently, so I have to agree with, I agree with what Bob said.
I had some specific proposed changes. I would like to take a general position that, like a number 1, I kind of can go for the second sentence with some changes. Like, the Open Government Advisory Group recommends to the mayor, who appoints Vega's members with approval from the council, that the next appointment to Vega be someone who supports open government or is knowledgeable of, etc. I wouldn't want to emphasize enforcement or believes in the functions of the office. I would put in something also in the front, like the functions, here would be the preamble, the functions assigned by law to the Office of Open Government are very important to the district and its credibility. OGAG recommends that the Office of Open Government should continue to train and advise public bodies on compliance with the Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meetings Act, including taking public complaints and, when warranted, enforcement actions of the Open Meetings Act. Like, we want to endorse this group as being a very important law, and the existing law is like that. But I think where it went too far for me was, yes, that it's reducing the independence, maybe, but if we're worried about Vega's independence, we have all of elections to worry about, not just a sub-rule to the Open Meeting Act. I trust Vega and I trust our upcoming elections. I mean, I have to want to go.
Barney, I think the independence issue is, as the statute is currently constructed, the Office of Open Government has independent decision-making authority regarding OMA and FOIA that BIGA does not have authority to countermand. That is what is being discussed is whether BEGA, the independence of the office under the current statute as opposed to what it might be a week from now.
You think having an appeal process that involves Vega in some way erodes the independence of the office? Like, they're still going about their work independently, but so the addition of an appeals step is an erosion of its.
There should be an appeal process. Under FOIA, the appeal process after the administrative appeal is to the Superior Court. There should be a parallel structure under the Open Meetings Act, but there isn't.
The initial.
Appealing what exactly?
Well, an agency, a complaint is filed. The Office of Open Government issues an opinion, as it did with the Caribbean Commission. The Caribbean Commission, rather than sitting there and not doing anything, might want to appeal the original, or the cost, might want to appeal what the ruling was of the Open Government Office. It has no avenue of appeal.
But they're appealing something that's only advisory.
Well, not under the Open Meetings Act. It is not. It can be an order. Under FOIA, it can be only the statute. The Open Government Office statute says generally that the Office of Open Government has authority over Title II, which is the Freedom of Information Act, and can issue advisory opinions. Under the Open Meetings Act, it can issue orders, which it can enforce by seeking injunctive relief in the court.
But then that could be appealed in court.
Not by the agency. Well, the agency can appeal to the Court of Appeals if the OOG wins in the Superior Court. But what happens in the situation of the cost, which significantly differed with the Office of Open Government as to an order, okay? It has no avenue of appeal. Now, there is no place for it to go, and independently of the Office of Open Government first going to court to enforce its order.
Right.
So the agency can't proactively say, we disagree with you, we're going to challenge your ruling.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is until the Open Government Office takes it to court to enforce it, it's just an order, and
the agency has to follow it at its own peril. Or it can do what its members are sworn not to do, which is violate the law.
The maximum penalty.
I understand what the penalty is, but the notion is that if you're ordered by an agency with authority to issue such an order, to do something, and you disregard the order, then that's really not a good way to be running anything, you know? I mean, that's like saying the president is above the law, okay? The agency is above the law. It's been ordered by an agency, a body with authority to do something, and it refuses.
They're in contempt.
I agree. It could happen, and it would be this fine, which I think is like $250. I read the law once. It's like $250.
But the goal isn't the fine.
It's horribly embarrassing. I would think to be fined by the Office of the Government. I mean, OCTA would be embarrassed, and we would change.
Barney, fines are the least of the problem. Okay, because nobody has ever fined. I know of 3 cases in the past 30 years where there have been fines in FOIA cases. Okay, in the country. The issue is FOIA and the Open Meetings Act are fundamentally remedial. They attempt to correct the agency's misbehavior so that it won't happen again. So the notices are posted, so that the recordings are available in the future. They're not there to punish. They're there to correct. Okay, so an agency is ordered to do something, it disregards the order. That doesn't solve the problem for the public that we need access to the records, we need access to the recording.
Your primary way of enforcing it is the embarrassment of these actions.
But we're looking at it from the other side. The agency is, the board is saying, we disagree with the thing that we were ordered to do. We don't think we should have to do that. Okay? And if it comes to an issue of an exemption, whether they have to disclose something they say is protected by an exemption, for example. Okay? And so their choice is disclose it even though we don't think we should have to and we think it would be a bad idea, or wait and refuse to disclose it and wait for the Office of Open Government to go to court to force us to.
Do you think that it makes sense? So this, oh, go ahead, Kathy. Oh,
I just was, I mean, given the time and this conversation could go on a long time, both the suggestions to number 1 seemed reasonable to me, and if we could come up with the suggestions for that. And then number 2, so it's number 3 that feels like the really contentious one. So I just wanted reactions from Josh on the comments about the suggestions about number 1, and if people had comments on number 2, to try to do it in order so that we can, if there are things we can agree on and there's consensus on the first couple, that could be closed out before we continue the longer discussion.
Yes, and I actually, just from a process standpoint, unless you guys feel like there is a huge rush on this, we are scheduled to have a meeting in July too, and so there aren't that many of us, and so at this point we could put this in a Google Doc and folks could actually do comment bubbles and comment on it. There are probably not everyone's going to comment. There are probably half of the people who will have feedback on it, and so we could have the discussion today, finish the discussion in this meeting, but then allow people to actually comment on the document itself and vote on it in the next meeting. Just because I don't know, it's like we're doing track changes orally in the meeting, and so knowing what you're voting on I think is critical, and so I wanted to put that out there as an idea, that we use this meeting to discuss the document, put it up right after this meeting for people to comment on, give them 2 weeks, and then we have 2 weeks to look at it and then vote on it in the first week of July. So how does that timing work in other decisions going on?
What?
Because in its current state, if we vote on it in its current state, I think, given the differences of opinion, it would be a challenge to get it passed. So,
yeah. I think that sounds reasonable to me.
Sorry.
Point of order. If there were amendments that I know that were discussed, language changes that the proposers would accept as friendly, then we would be voting on the underlying proposal whenever that vote happens. But if there are that's a question, sorry, I phrased it as a statement. And then 2, if there were amendments to the language of the proposal that others wanted to amend the proposal that weren't accepted as friendly, would the group be able to vote on that amendment?
So if we go with the suggestion that I just made, then I would think that we would treat this as a proposal today, not a formal proposal that we're moving on, or that we're making that we're trying to vote on. And we would not be voting on this base document. To your first point, we would be voting on a new document that was created for the July.
So your suggestion is we take the time between now and the July meeting to try to work on a consensus, or as close to consensus language as we can, that would be able to pass the board.
Yeah.
Okay. Personally, I'm in favor of that.
But you guys were going to comment.
I loved Karina's suggestions. I would defer to Bob on how I would want to characterize the Freedom of Information Act if it's not enforcement. But I thought that was great. I'm a little bit wary on never mind. I don't know how to say that quickly. So, yeah, that's all I have.
But if you, like, so honestly, the timing, if you guys submitted this, and I think we've all discussed it, like, if you want to vote today, then that's your prerogative. There's a quorum. This is like a great turnout, though, by the way. So, so if you want to vote on it today, we absolutely will. So just.
I mean, so far there hasn't been a comment on 2, which might mean. Sorry, we haven't had a comment on 2, so maybe that one is fine.
I have a question about that. What version of the legislation is this based on? Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, legislation is often a moving target, and I'm looking at the committee report here. What version of the legislation is this based on, the comments? Do you know?
Bob, you sent it.
It is sort of, it is based, I think, on an assumption that the BSA amendment is going to pass. And that, I think, is problematic at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, we should have a version of the bill at first reading. I don't know, it takes a while. Do you know, Jack, when that?
The amendment has had first reading already.
So is this based on the amendment? It's not based on the committee print?
Well,
I'm just curious because, again, I know this has
the amendment
changed.
was simply the committee print is the amendment.
The amendment made the committee print.
Yeah. So that it has that the language that's in the committee report.
Yeah, I just didn't see this, the appeal to the board.
Yeah, well, there was an amendment in the nature of the substitute at the first reading, so there wouldn't be a doc. You would be talking about the amendment in the nature of the substitute.
Right. There is.
Right. That's the final. That was a document that was voted on first reading. But there were also additional standalone amendments, so those wouldn't be. So there's no one document right now that is.
I just wouldn't want to be commenting on.
I in my office have the language of the chairman's bill, of the chairman's print.
It passed on first reading.
And this is based on that?
If you're talking about the committee, the Judiciary Committee report, no.
Okay.
I have a copy in my office, and I can email to you what the chairman's version looks like.
Okay, yeah, because I'm asking because this doesn't seem to comport with what's in the committee
I believe
report.
there is an appeal to, at least it's in the report, if it's not in the language of the bill.
But I would say if we're going to work on recommendations based on the budget, we should maybe wait for like the final, like as Brian was saying, it's a moving target. So wouldn't we want to know that it's in the budget that actually becomes law before we make a recommendation on it?
It's contingent. So two is contingent on it becoming law, and so it's not a. So 2 is that we resolve as a group to take further action. It's not in and of itself a actual.
I'm sorry, it's difficult to hear.
Sorry. So two is OGAG resolves to begin prompt work. It's not in and of itself a recommendation. Sorry that it's a little bit not clear from the structure of the document. So I think it's not incoherent to vote on it, given that it hasn't passed, but I understand what you're saying.
It does have the caveat that if this change is enacted, OGAG resolves to begin prompt work. So I think that covers either way.
You could.
And if it is not enacted, we could, if something else is enacted, we can come back and address that. But
Number 2 seems to be kind of consensus language. I think I agree with you in terms of the board having that type of, someone on the board having that type of experience.
If it's not enacted, though, do we still want to do some? We still want to work with them to make sure that the Office of Open Government is engaged, and I think Karuna suggested adding some language to that to these that do that work on like training and things like that. So
well, that could be in number 1, but I would say with number 2, you could just delete the entire first sentence and the if this change is enacted, and we can resolve to do the second sentence on our own. We don't have to have legislation at all.
I agree.
That's
But that takes away this controversy.
It can be the like what seems to be the consensus sentiment that regardless of the language, the mayor should appoint someone or take into consideration someone who has open government experience, principal is committed to the principles of open government, transparency, like for anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I just emailed you the chairman's plan. With the amendments.
Okay. Great. That's an accomplishment.
There was
Taking out that
no
first sentence
objection
and then adopting it?
In part, so you mean just
Number two.
So just starting with OGAG resolves. I mean, I think Karina was very.
Sorry, I'm totally out of order.
I couldn't hear you.
I move that we, with the amendment of removing the first sentence, vote to adopt number 2.
Second. First sentence plus the phrase up to the comma.
Okay, first sentence plus the phrase up to the comma.
Great.
That was seconded.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
So,
I'm abstaining.
actually, do we have to do a roll call? I think for this, do we need to do a roll call? It's kind of,
Chair, can somebody read out loud?
Yeah, so that's my problem. My problem is wordsmithing in this meeting and not being able to read for clarity. Because I think the idea is that the sentiment, I can agree with the sentiment of what's being proposed here, but it's hard for me, without seeing it concretely, to really feel that I can be in favor of this provision. And so I think that we're saying, regardless of if this law passes or not, we think that it's important that we have these considerations as we think about this appointment. I can concur with that, but I want to see that as opposed to just having it described. So that's my problem. I think that I believe that the chair had proposed that we look at revising these documents and look at it concretely in July, and I feel comfortable with that. I'm less comfortable of wordsmithing here and then voting on these different provisions.
yeah, I abstained too. That's why I was like, maybe we should do a roll call, because I also do not like piecemeal. I'm not really comfortable. And so, but I also don't know, I'm learning Robert's rules. So if someone moves, I don't know that I can stop that. So, that's,
well,
I don't remember the technical, I'm sorry, I don't remember the technical, but I moved to actually reconsider. Is that right?
I don't know. This video is going to be a mess. Like, I apologize to the public, but if someone knows if a move to reconsider is the appropriate procedural.
There was a vote and nobody called for a roll call vote. Therefore, the vote stands.
And I was on the winning side. So if you're on the winning side, you can. But is it reconsider? Yeah. So I
think that any member of the board can ask for a roll call vote, and I think that's what the chair did.
I don't think anyone.
It was after.
You said you don't think anybody.
No, after the vote, yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're right. Of course. Of course.
Of how the vote carried.
Okay. So let's do a roll call vote. If I am able to call for a roll call vote.
I have a point of clarification.
Please, sure.
But just that, I think that we talked about beforehand that if there's like wordsmithing that doesn't substantially change the sentence, that can be done afterwards. That we talked about?
Yeah, but that's not the issue at hand.
Can I just throw out the point too that I mean, I understand there are 3 bullet points here, but I would encourage us all to think about it as one, as opposed to like piecemealing, voting on one sentence, like 1, 2, 3, because as a government member, I may, agree with the sentiment of number 2, but not necessarily where we come to on 1 and 3. And I don't know that I want to vote in favor of 2 if 1 and 3 end up, with some language in it. So I want to see the sentiment and the statement as a whole to sign on. I don't think it's necessarily like piecemealed into 3 statements.
As another government member, that's the beauty of the piecemeal, that you can just adopt number 2 and vote yes on number 2 and reject number 3.
I understand that and I take that, but I also am, concerned about how this may be phrased or portrayed as a whole. And so I do want to, understand what we're saying as a whole versus piecemeal.
I'd also like to understand how we say this.
Yes.
What does it mean to adopt a statement from this group?
Yeah, and where does it go? So
We've never done that before. Just to be clear. We have a website that we can post it on. And, I don't know when it works. It doesn't light up. Now it's lit up. So we are breaking new ground. Today was the first time, at least since I've been here since June 2016, that we have voted. We've had a lot of great information.
And 2 meetings ago, someone mentioned that there would, in one of the committees, part of what they would do was, if we draft a statement like this, bring to the group sort of what the next procedural steps for it are. Like, do we find a way to present it to the mayor? Do we put it on the OGAG website? Do we, put it on a link on our Twitter? So things like that. And so, I that's a great question. One that remains.
I think we may be overthinking it for this one because 2 is not a recommendation to the mayor, and it can be standalone because it is simply OGAG resolves to X, right? So if we want to take on the work, we can resolve to take on. I mean, and I guess I'll say, I'm happy to take this sentence out of this document and merely vote on the sentence as a standalone thing about what we want to do as a group, right? And exit from the document going forward or something.
Can I ask another clarifying question? When we say that we would start work, that we would start work right away to try to define what it means to have open government experience, does that mean that as an advisory capacity, we would be advising DCHR on a position description? Bega. So they don't go through DCHR.
Well, it's Bega members. Yeah.
Well, who's ever the hiring manager is, we would just be advising on some points to put in the position description.
MODA, maybe.
Yeah. Well, this is where
I think we're talking about 2 different things. This is talking about somebody to be appointed to the board who would be
Right. Okay.
As
So
the
position
board
description.
now is made up of experts in ethics.
Got it.
The idea would be to have a person with open meetings and open records expertise.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I was confused for a bit. It's just on for MODA, wherever they go, and I'm looking at you, Alan. I know you're not in MODA anymore. But just advising MODA on the qualifications for a board member for
So I would think, you have asked several great questions that are in need of clarification, which further brings us back to the point that we voted on something where there's still a lot of open questions. And so the motion to reconsider, does that mean that we can do the votes again? Or what is for those of you who know the procedural?
It would be a revote.
I don't think we finished the first one.
Right, that's right. Because we didn't do the roll call.
Well, we
But
didn't.
Bob said that
We didn't say what the outcome of the vote was. There was a motion for roll call also, and we didn't do that. Yeah.
Okay. So based on the group vote, there was only 1 opposed, and so I requested that we do a roll call vote. And so I cannot declare the response, but I will ask for a roll call vote. For all voting members of the Office of Local Government, let's do a roll call vote. And can we start?
Well, I think
Go slow.
what are we voting?
Yeah, what are we voting on?
Item number 2. So
The amended item number 2.
Julie made a motion to vote to adopt the last sentence with "if this change is enacted, removed." The last sentence of item number 2 from this document. She made a motion that we approve this language for number 2. That was the motion, and it was seconded.
Can we read it?
Yes. OGAG resolves to begin prompt work with stakeholders of open government and transparency in the district to define what is experience in open government and transparency to inform the mayor's future nominations of VEGA members.
I just want to say, out of context, it doesn't make much sense. So I think we can add some more language could be added there.
So here, our immediate issue is that a motion was made and it was seconded, so we have to vote on it now. Because we are doing a roll call vote, everyone has an opportunity to vote yay or nay on this, I believe. So we should do that and then move on. I believe, like, anyone who has like thoughts about this from a procedural or a other standpoint, please feel free to weigh in here. Okay, please.
Okay, I'm gonna vote nay, and my explanation is gonna be that I would want more general language that doesn't tie directly to the language of VSA language.
This is just a vote.
Yes.
Nay.
Yes, no, yeah.
Oh, am I next? Nay.
Nay. Wait, slow down. As your note listed, Kathy, as note takers, we're with that.
Right back, yeah, okay. Yep.
Nay.
Yay. No. No.
Yay.
No.
Oh my God, sorry.
Yeah, please.
Kathy, is that part?
Absent.
Wait, and because I'm doing there, you're not voting in order of my list here, so I have to.
We're the same problem, yes.
So, okay. Brian, I think Brian, your name.
I voted no.
Do you want to call the roll and we can vote that
Yeah,
way?
that's probably the best way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Problem solving.
Okay, so let's do it that way. This is
We could do it for the rest of the people, because we have those, I think, there we go.
Shannon Turner,
Yay.
Tiffany Crow, nay. Josh,
Yay.
Robert Becker,
Abstain.
Catherine Pettit,
Yay.
Brian Flowers.
I think I voted once.
No,
but
you
I'll vote
did.
no again.
You did.
Doesn't count twice though, Brian.
Jay Melder,
No.
Rebecca Katz,
No.
Marie Whitaker,
No.
David, you voted. Victoria,
No.
Alan, you voted. Barney, you voted. Zach, did you vote already too?
I did.
Will
It
you?
was yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Julie Kanzler,
Yay.
Tom Moore,
No.
and Elaine Block.
No.
Is there anyone else? Karuna?
No.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, is there anyone whose name I did not call who is a voting member yet?
Clarence.
Clarence.
Or no. Abstain.
Okay. And with that vote, the motion has failed. And we will, am I allowed to say that we will take this up again? Okay. We will take this up again. Yes.
Can I ask a question? Those of you who voted no, would you look at the document?
Yes.
Question
I would
I would support continuing to work on whether it's just number 2 or the full proposal between now and the next meeting on a Google Doc where voting members can look, make comments, try to understand where the exact issues are, and see if there is some language that is agreeable to the majority of the board and can pass a measure. I would also like to work, if it's possible, in the next month to understand what it means to make a statement from OGAG and what the function of making that statement would be, whether it's posting on the website, which sounds like a great idea to me, or not.
Another idea is to use drafts.dc.gov and actually edit this in public, since we've already started the discussion in public.
website functioning?
That's a good question.
It could be.
I actually just checked it today and I just couldn't get through that.
Yes. Yes, you are. Mr. Flower.
Yeah, Josh, as the person who drafted this, are you anticipating that the criteria that's developed would come back before this body for further consideration and a vote?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't want to take credit for drafting the whole thing, although, but yeah, I mean, I guess we would form a committee would go out, think about it, come back. We've never really, done that either.
Yeah.
Actually, like the first thing we voted on was the first time I think that we've actually talked about.
So, yes. So I think, I mean, and Jay seconded this, not in a formal way. I should be more careful with my language, but the idea that people who may not join the committee permanently are now interested in this, and voting no, for instance, means that this is recorded, this is a public matter, we voted, and so I'm not against the sentiments. So I would have thoughts and comments on the document. I think for now, because our comments may be a little bit more sensitive and in development. So drafts.dc.gov might not be the first place we put it. Not to say that a future draft won't go there, but since we're talking to each other for now, maybe we do a Google Doc or something like that. But I would encourage everyone to participate in the drafting of it. And I mean, there's nothing hidden here, so you can share it or get feedback from your stakeholder groups, whatever, but it's something that I do think we should consider further. And the procedural or the process parts of it, if there's anyone who wants to volunteer to really sort of figure out what those questions are and think about the answers, both what's in the statute or what we are required to do, what we're allowed to do, please feel free to do that. But I do think that should be considered at the time of this document too. So we are at 5:05, so we're 5 minutes past time. We have the room for a little bit if folks want to discuss amongst yourselves. Is there anything else to be discussed at this meeting? Sort of next steps, as I understand them, we're going to take this. If you could send a soft copy, so I put this in a Word document for myself so I could track changes, but if you could send it in soft copy, I can create a shared document, put everybody on it, and send it out after this meeting, maybe with the minutes. And then we can begin commenting on it.
Tiffany, I have a piece of very new business.
Okay.
Before the meeting, I sent an email with a bill attached to it that Councilmember McDuffie introduced on the 5th that is related to record management and archiving. And it came up in government operations because the secretary is under government operations and in this weird system where the Office of Open Government, FOIA, and the Open Meetings Act are all, because they're related to BIGA under judiciary, we have a problem because we have two different committees trying to deal with something with an issue that is very closely related to transparency and to how Octo is going to handle records in the future. So he has proposed to create an 11-member commission on records management and archiving, and without any mention of Octo as part of that, or the Office of Open Government, or the people who have to deal with records transactions on a regular basis. So I hope you all now have a copy of the draft, but I think this is an issue that maybe we need to address because it has potential implications for what Octo does and public disclosure of all kinds of records.
Did you send it to the whole group?
I sent it to the group, to the email list. Okay, well,
Did other people get it?
did anybody get
I
it?
haven't gotten it yet, but if you don't mind trying to resend it after the meeting.
Okay, but just for everybody's information, It is,
Bill 22-842.
and it was, as I said, it was introduced 2 days ago.
22-842.
Yes. And it sort of shows that various parts of the DC government don't talk to each other very well.
Oh, also, is there anyone in here who is a parliamentarian? Or, yeah, well,
I would volunteer
We've all done
thank you, Budget. If there's someone who is.
I think Zach volunteered.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, I thought you were volunteering.
he kind of hid, like I couldn't make eye contact with
No,
him. Like,
I
he
would volunteer to be a parliamentarian of sorts, yeah.
All right, thank you. I'll just sit next to you in every meeting.
I understand where Robert's rules, you said.
Yeah. All right, thank you all. A meeting is adjourned. A motion to adjourn.
I found out about it at about 2:30 this
Really?
afternoon.
Oh, really?
But two of them can hold on.